Hi there, my name is Robert McLeman, and this is a short video for students in Wilfrid Laurier University course ES102, and it's the introduction to the fifth and final lab of this course. And in this lab, students are being asked to tell the professors of Canada, at least those who do environmental research, what sorts of research questions they should be studying today. And the genesis for this lab is that not so long ago I was up in Ottawa and I was helping something called the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council assess applications made by researchers from right across Canada who were seeking money to do environmental research questions. And in reviewing these research proposals, these grant proposals, I was thinking to myself that it would be useful to ask the students who've been through now the complete first year course at Wilfrid Laurier what they think that professors should be studying these days. Because to be honest, a lot of the applications that I saw from my colleagues were the kinds of things that environmental researchers have been studying for decades now. There were not a real lot of them, I thought, that showed a lot of real cutting-edge innovation. And this is not a criticism of my colleagues, it's just a reality that people do research and it does take many years to start to develop answers to some of the questions we ask. But at the same time, we still need to be thinking about new questions. And so that's what this lab is about. It's to challenge you, the student, who now has quite a number of months under their belt in environmental studies, to think about what sorts of questions we should be studying. And so what this lab does is going to introduce you to what a grant proposal is like and how you would write one. You're not going to go into the complete details that I do. For example, when I'm writing grant proposals, my proposals will be sometimes 30, 40, 50 pages in length. But in this lab, you're actually going to go through the thought process and start to sketch out some ideas on what you would do if you were putting a grant proposal together. So there's a few exercises that you're going to do in your lab session. So the first one is, as a whole group, you and your lab colleagues are going to brainstorm, and you're going to think about what sorts of questions that you think that people should be doing. What sorts of general topics should we be doing more research on acid rain, or on climate change, or on water quality, or endangered species. You think about those topics, and based on what you've learned in the course so far, sort of identify a list of priorities you think that environmental researchers should be focusing on. And then once your group as a whole has come up with these, then your lab instructor is going to split you up into smaller groups. And then within that smaller group, you're actually going to think more carefully about one of the topics that came up, one of the subjects that was suggested, and say, well, if we were going to do a grant proposal on something like this, and we were going to put a research project together, what precisely would we be doing? What sort of questions would we ask specifically? What sort of methods would we use to find that answer? Let's say, for example, you were concerned about the amount of salt that we put on the roads here in Waterloo region. And you might wonder, does that have an impact, an ecological impact on wildlife in the region? Well, if that's the question that you decide in your small group that you should pursue, then, well, how would you go about measuring that? Would you be interested in the impacts of salt on animals that live in water, or animals that live in the long grass at the side of the road, or on the soils? And then if you were interested, say, in the water quality impacts of salt, then how would you measure that? Would you, for example, go underneath a bridge and take water quality measures after a road has been salted, but when the road salt is melting into the stream or river down below? I don't know. I'm just making this up as I go along. But the point being is that's what your group's going to do. You're going to take about 20 minutes and think, well, what specifically, what kind of questions are we going to ask? And then you're going to get back together with the whole group, and then each mini group is going to just give a little very, very brief verbal presentation of what their ideas were and what they would do. And then the rest of the group is going to ask questions and do sort of a constructive criticism of that. So the example I just gave, the group might listen to it and say, that sounds interesting, but in a practical sense, if the river is frozen, how are you going to measure the amount of salt that's getting into it? Or how far downstream would you need to measure? Or does it matter? And how much money would you need to do that? And who would do the work? Things like that. So that's the kind of thing that you'll go through in your group. After you've met with your lab group, then there's an individual assignment that you need to do. And simply that is for you to rough out your own idea for a research proposal. And it's not a group project, but I'm hoping that the lab meeting, in doing that and going through that exercise collectively, it sort of kickstarts your own ideas and makes the whole assignment easier for you to do. And so again, what you're going to do is come up with a good idea of something that you think environmental researchers should do, and you're going to put together a rough proposal of how you would do it. And in the lab instructions, there's some very specific headings of how you would structure your document and the information that you would need to put into it. You're going to need to think about things like what are the key research questions, if you want to phrase it like a scientist. What hypotheses do you want to test? What is your reason for doing so, your rationale? Is it because you think that that road salt has an impact on endangered species, or that you think that the water quality may be affecting the water that we use for our drinking water, or whatever you think is the reason for doing the research? And then again, come up with the methods, and what are the outcomes that you want to achieve through this research project? Do you want to generate research that will influence the policies and practices of the regional government when it comes to the application of road salt or something like that? And then you're going to need to think of a budget. So how much is it going to cost you in this example to go underneath a bridge or 2 bridges or 10 bridges and measure the salt content of the water? Now, you don't need to go out there and start obtaining quotations from companies that supply technical equipment. Just come up with a ballpark figure. Do you think you're going to hire a grad student to do it? If you are, then you probably need $15,000, maybe $20,000 a year for that grad student to work on the project. Are they going to need a transportation budget? If they're working here in Waterloo Region to study road salt under a bridge, probably not. If you want to study polar bear health in the Arctic, you're going to need a very big budget. So, if you're comparing the two, a budget to study road salt under bridges in Waterloo Region, you might need $30,000, $40,000, or $50,000 over a couple of years to do something like that. If you're going to the Arctic, one trip alone for 1 week up in the Arctic costs maybe $5,000, $10,000. The airfare alone is $5,000, I think. So keep that in mind. If it's going to be a 5-year project in the Arctic, you probably need at least $500,000 to pull it off. But you don't have to get too precise in your numbers. It's just sort of give you an idea of how expensive research is. Anyhow, I think that that's enough instruction for this lab. And since this is my last video for the course, I also wanted to take this opportunity to say that it's really been my pleasure teaching you, and that I hope you do well on your final exams, and I hope that you got something valuable out of the course. And if you see me around campus, this summer or in the fall again, and you're not in my classes, be sure to say hi and let me know how you're doing. And I'll talk to you again. Good luck. Thanks.